Little's Chapter 9. The next morning, Mr. Little was walking back and forth in Little's kitchen. Mrs. Little and Lucy sat at a table watching him. Granny Little was sitting at the table too, knitting. Mr. Little kept looking at the clock on the wall. 10 o'clock, he said, and they're not here. They should have come back half an hour ago. Who's not here? Said Granny Little. Uncle Pete and Tom, said Mr. Little. They went to the kitchen to see if the mousetraps had been set. What shall we do? Said Mrs. Little. Mr. Little strapped on his sword. I'm going to find them, he said. They're probably all right, but I can't stand the waiting. I'd better go with you, said Mrs. Little. No, I can handle it alone, said Mr. Little. I want you here with Granny, just in case. Do you think mice would come here? No, but you can't be sure, said Mr. Little. They did in 35. When there are enough of them, they'll try anything. When Mr. Little got to the kitchen, he couldn't find Uncle Pete and Tom. He didn't see any mousetraps either. He went to the cellar. Still no sign of the boy and his uncle. And there were no mousetraps in the cellar. Something's wrong, thought Mr. Little. Mr. Little went to the garbage can. There had to be mousetraps there. It was the best place to catch mice. But there were none, and still no sign of the missing Littles. It's very strange, thought Mr. Little. No mice, no mousetraps, and no Tom or Uncle Pete. He decided to return to the kitchen. That's where Uncle Pete wanted to go in the first place. So Mr. Little turned back and headed for the kitchen. Meanwhile, back in the Littles' rooms, Lucy was thinking about her father. Suppose he needs someone to send a message or something. I should have gone with him. She looked into the living room. Granny Little was sitting in her chair by the fireplace. Lucy's mother was watching the door, a kitchen knife in her lap. I should be with my father, thought Lucy. Then suddenly she made up her mind. She ran to her room and got the bow and arrows. Then she slipped out the back door into the passageway. Mr. Little was in the kitchen under the radiator. He waited until he could hear the Newcombs talking in the living room. Then he felt it was safe to look around. Near the door to the dining room, he came upon Uncle Pete's sword. Uncle Pete would never let go of his sword, he thought, unless it was knocked from his hands. This is bad. I wonder if... He put the thought out of his mind. Don't think, he told himself, just keep looking. Mr. Little drew his sword. He went into the dining room. He kept close to the wall and walked slowly toward the fireplace. Just as Mr. Little was leaving the kitchen, Lucy got there. She saw her father go into the dining room, sword in hand. Lucy ran to catch up. Her father was only a few feet ahead of her when suddenly a giant cat leaped at him out of the shadows. Lucy was never so scared in her life. She ran toward the cat. She ran without thinking. The gigantic animal had attacked her father. She would save her father somehow. The tiny girl came up behind the cat. Its long tail swished back and forth over her head. She took an arrow and jabbed it as hard as she could into the cat's tail. Yow! Yelled the cat, and it ran out of the dining room, through the hall, and into the living room. Mr. Little was not hurt. He jumped to his feet. At the same time, Uncle Pete and Tom came running out of the fireplace. They had been cornered by the cat and were hiding under the logs. Let's get out of here, yelled Mr. Little. He ran for the kitchen. Not without this, said Uncle Pete. He bent down and scooped up his sword. The four Littles dashed under the radiator and through the trap door.